Ase produces, above all, Art Zone. Gravediggers.
Hi.
Hello, folks. We're back.
Welcome back to our analysis of the mysterious death of Dr. Frank Olson. Woo!
Yeah, so we're back to discuss the CIA and their omnipotent presence.
We do want to issue a content warning again. We discuss drug use and possible suicide in this episode. If you feel suicidal and need to talk, we will put a list of suicide crisis lines in the episode description. Sorry for being a little late this week. We are, of course, human beings with lives. I was 9 days late to my own birth and a chunk of a baby, so sorry.
Ironically enough, I was early to my own birth. I was born somewhat premature.
Do you know how many days?
I'm not sure. I think it was a month and a half early.
Oh, wow. That's pretty significant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was huge too. I was a chubby and also very bruised baby.
Oh, but you're not huge now, which is ironic.
No, I'm not. We also, of course, want to give our solidarity with Palestine, everything that is happening right now, including the forced evictions in Sheikh Jarrah, the assaults on Gaza, the desecration of Al-Aqsa, and the protesters killed in the West Bank and in 48 territories. So all of our solidarity to the Palestinians right now, of course.
Yeah, it's really grim. I've had Al Jazeera Arabic live on my TV for the past week, and it's just been depressing. But it's also heartening to see a shift in the narrative and a sort of, I don't know, I haven't seen this before where just so many people are expressing solidarity across the political sort of world, if you will, like from journalists to musicians to actors to people in different countries organizing rallies. It seems a lot more that the Palestinian cause has rallied in a way that I haven't seen before.
Right, and Zionism is becoming more untenable to support. And I think a lot of that, too, is that Israel is just no longer able to intimidate people into silence.
Yeah, the facade is slowly collapsing, or not even slowly, but quickly collapsing. And on the same level, I think people are beginning to realize, more and more people are beginning to realize that the two-state solution was dead in the water and that the reality is an apartheid state, and the solution to that is a binational state, a single state for people, including the right of return to all Palestinian refugees.
If you haven't listened to our last episode about Frank Olson, this episode might not make a whole lot of sense to you. So we definitely recommend starting with that one. I mean, hey, we're not your boss. We're not in charge of you. If you like to start your stories in the middle, then you've come to the right place. But if you like a complete arc, you're going to have to listen to episode 55 of our podcast. So let's quickly review. Dr. Frank Olson, a U.S. Army biochemist at Camp Detrick, firmly believed that the United States had used biological weapons against enemy soldiers and civilians during the Korean War. According to his wife, Alice, and others who knew him, Frank was very upset by these war crimes. Frank Olson was also involved with Project MK-Ultra, a CIA operation seeking ways to break a prisoner. MK-Ultra is most famous for experimenting with drugs like LSD on human subjects in order to torture them into giving up information and possibly retraining them as spies. From Wednesday, November 18th to Friday, November 20th, 1953, Frank Olson went on a retreat with several colleagues from Camp Detrick and the CIA, including Sidney Gottlieb, the head of MK-Ultra. At this retreat, Olson and his colleagues were unwittingly dosed with LSD. When Olson returned from the retreat, his wife Alice reports that he was upset and wanted to quit his job, but his boss, Vin Rouet, convinced him to stay. Frank Olson's colleagues then brought him to New York City, allegedly seeking psychological treatment from Dr. Harold Abramson, an allergist associated with Project MK-Ultra. So when we last spoke, Dr. Frank Olson had plummeted out the window of room 1018A at the Statler Hotel in New York City. His roommate and colleague, Robert Lashbrook of the CIA, had called Dr. Harold Abramson, saying, quote, "Well, he's gone," end quote. To which Abramson replied, "That's too bad."
And I just want to reemphasize here that we know that this happened because back at the time, operators would have to plug in phones into a console, and the operator heard all of this conversation.
That Saturday morning, Vin Rowett drives to the Olson home in Maryland and tells the family that there's been an accident. Frank fell or jumped out a window in New York. Frank Olson's son, Eric, points out that from the beginning, the story wasn't straightforward. Fell or jumped? I don't see how he could have fallen through a closed hotel window. For the glass to break, there has to be some kind of force. It was the middle of the night. It's not as though Olson would have been running around the hotel room.
Yeah, also, I'm not quite sure if this was the case at the time, but hotel in general, like mid-rise and high-rise buildings, their windows are quite thick. They'd need impressive force to break. It's not the same type of glass as, a mug or a cup or something.
Yeah, my apartment has double pane glass windows, and even if I got a running start, I don't think that I could jump through the glass.
Yeah, and same here. I live in an apartment as well, and I'm looking at my window right now, and I don't think I'd be able to break it with anything short of like a hammer or something.
Yeah, and even then, there are special tools for people to use to break that kind of glass in an emergency.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, did you know if you are stuck in your car underwater, you can pull out the headrest thing, like the thing at the top of the seat, and use it to bash open the window?
Oh, I learned something new today. That's nice.
Yeah, that's one of my greatest fears, by the way. I have recurring nightmares about being stuck in a sinking car.
But you know how to swim, right?
Yeah, I know how to swim.
Yeah.
I'm not like a fast or graceful swimmer, but if you push me into the water, as long as my head wasn't injured, I could swim.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay, yeah. But I mean, I feel like there's a common trope in movies where a car goes into like a body of water and someone is like struggling to get out.
So, regarding Frank Olson plummeting out of this hotel window, shouldn't Robert Lashbrook have been able to give some account of what happened, even if he was asleep this whole time? He was there. Like, was Olson acting normal when he went to bed?
Look, the CIA's efforts at this cover-up are genuinely dismal. Like, if I put the amount of effort they put in their cover-up on like an undergrad paper of any kind, I'd be either forced to repeat the entire year or get like a D-.
The family was told not to open Frank Olson's casket because the body was too seriously disfigured from the fall. After Frank Olson's death, Vin Rowett would often visit the family and have martinis with Alice. Later, Eric learned that Rowett kept tabs on their family, trying to figure out how much they knew. That in itself is so creepy to me.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I wonder, like, knowing where Frank Olson and Vin Rowett and these people were working, I don't think Alice could have said no to Vin Rowett, like, popping over. These are, like, very powerful people.
And it was also the 1950s. Alice seems like a very smart woman to me, and it seems like she had figured out pretty early on that something was amiss, but, like, what is she gonna do?
Yeah, exactly.
Everything reads as suspicious, but the family just figured Frank Olson had died in some strange, tragic accident in New York. Until, that is, the Rockefeller Report comes out in 1975. Officially called the United States President's Commission on CIA Activities within the United States, the Rockefeller Commission investigated the CIA's activities within the United States, essentially concerned that the agency had gone rogue and conducted illegal activities domestically.
Yeah, keep in mind that for all intents and purposes, like for officially, legally, whatever you want to call it, the CIA is not meant to investigate domestic, quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes with my fingers, threats. That's the purview of the FBI and other local, quote unquote, law enforcement agencies. The CIA's official and legal purview is specifically extraterritorial cases outside of the US. So to investigate domestic issues, domestic situations is fundamentally illegal as per the CIA's charter.
And at this point, the public is wary of intelligence agencies, and for good reason. They were repeatedly caught spying on citizens. Furthermore, journalists like Seymour Hersh uncovered atrocities committed abroad, like the My Lai massacre in Vietnam. The suspicions about the CIA turned out to be well-founded. The CIA had illegally surveilled US citizens, especially those suspected to be members of dissident groups. The list of notable people who were once under Five Eyes surveillance includes some people you'd expect, like Ali Khamenei and Nelson Mandela, but also Jane Fonda and Princess Diana. We have heard your cries for a Princess Di episode, by the way, and we promise we will do one eventually. It's on the list. The investigation also publicized Project MKUltra and renewed interest in the death of Dr. Frank Olson. The Rockefeller report contends that an army scientist was unwittingly given LSD and died by suicide in New York. The Olsons realized this must be Frank, but nobody from the commission notified them about this. They had to hear about it on the news.
Counterpoint, what if the agency had a different scientist that they dosed with LSD and they all died in New York committing suicide?
I guess that would be a major coincidence, but stranger things have happened. The family looks to Vin Rouet for answers, who confirms that the man mentioned in the Rockefeller report is Frank Olson. The Olsons reach out to Seymour Hersh to look into the case. Eric says Hersh was surprised that the family wasn't initially more skeptical of the official story given in 1953. This is just a side note, but young Seymour Hersh is such a hot nerd.
Yeah, he's also so fucking, it's hilarious to me that he's this family who are grieving, they just lost their father and their husband, and he's like, you fucking idiots, how could you accept this official story, you morons?
He's definitely a smart guy, and I respect him so much as a journalist, but he doesn't come across as a pleasant person to be around.
He's a crank, and I respect that.
Sensing an investigative nightmare, the US government begins reaching out to the Olsons, ostensibly to apologize for what the family has been through, but also to try and prevent the family from seeking more information and pursuing lawsuits. President Ford apologizes to the Olsons, but doesn't really say why he's sorry. More like, we're sorry this happened.
The classic non-apology. We're sorry you feel that way.
Right. Ford's staffers and cabinet, like Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld, tried to push for settlement and compensation immediately, fearing what future lawsuits might uncover. Back at the CIA, Director William Colby gives the Olson family a package of documents about the case and asks them not to share the information with the press. Eric says that once he looked at the documents, he could tell they were just some sort of cover story shoved together because they didn't really add up. Eric regrets not pushing Colby harder when the family received the documents, but he had no idea they would be so incoherent.
One could argue that Eric even regrets not pushing Colby out of a window in a New York hotel.
Oh no, Amr.
I am unstoppable.
It becomes clear to the family and their attorneys that the government would very much like for them to shut up and go away. Rather than solving the mystery about Frank Olson's death, the Rockefeller Commission and packet of CIA documents opened up more questions. The government offered the family a settlement of $1.25 million US, later reduced to $750,000, but under the condition that the Olsons wouldn't sue the government for the death of their father. They signed an agreement resolving all claims. The Federal Tort Claims Act means you can only sue the government for accidental death, not intentional. So if the government murders you on purpose, too bad. Monopoly on violence, Foucault, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I mean, this is so funny to me because by the letter of law, the government could have just avoided all of this problem and this entire, the whole lawsuit situation by just coming out and being like, yeah, your dad/husband knew too much, we killed him, whoops, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, clearly the problem here is narrative. If the CIA comes out saying we killed a US citizen on purpose because he knew too much, there would be some backlash to that, I assume. But who knows with Americans?
Would there? I don't know. I don't know. We've seen people like Chelsea Manning and Edward Snowden come out with troves of information about how various intelligence agencies are spying on Americans, possibly involved in wars. We've seen the Church Committee, the Rockefeller Committee, as we mentioned, all of these different, revelations that the CIA is doing bad things to Americans in America. I don't know. I don't see the backlash that could, to the point where it would hamstring them.
Right. There's also the Panama Papers. There's Guantanamo Bay, which is not a secret or a conspiracy.
Yeah.
And people are just like, oh, that's still a thing? Huh. In 1978, Eric's sister, Lisa, who was pregnant at the time, Her husband and their 2-year-old son, Jonathan, took a small plane up to New York to see a lumber mill they wanted to invest in. The plane crashed and the whole family died. The investigations and settlements seem to be a curse for the Olsons rather than an illumination. Seeking more answers, in 1984, the Olson family pays a visit to some of the people named in the story of Frank's death. The Statler Hotel's manager, Armand Pastor, repeats to them what he remembers from that night about Olson somehow crashing through a closed window and the switchboard operator hearing the strange phone call. He tells them that Frank's death has always upset him. Robert Lashbrook tells the family that Sidney Gottlieb was in New York with them, but the CIA files given to the family directly contradict that. Eric points out that people mess up details when they're giving a cover story, especially if that cover story is decades old. Perhaps Lashbrook forgot that he wasn't supposed to say Gottlieb was there. Lashbrook also says that he took Olson to his apartment in DuPont Circle on the short trip back to Washington, D.C. Olson was acting crazy and doing handstands in the corner. Lashbrook later testifies before a grand jury in New York, which took lots of litigation because he was very old and too sick to travel from LA to New York, but that testimony cannot be disclosed because grand jury testimonies are secret. The assistant district attorney in the docuseries suggests that someone killed Olson, but it wasn't Robert Lashbrook. The family also circles back to Vin Rouet and asks him if he ever regarded Frank as a security risk. Vin says no, but Eric points out that if he reacted as badly to the LSD as they say he did, he would have been a security risk. Someone with classified information acting unpredictably is, by definition, a security risk. So for Vin Rouet to say they never saw Frank Olson as a security risk means he's probably lying. The Olsons also met with Sidney Gottlieb, but he pretty much immediately tries to distance himself from his past with the CIA.
Yeah, so in researching for this episode, I found out that Gottlieb had apparently become a hippie, and he's living on a farm after he's left the CIA. And I guess it's nice to know that you can torture people for a couple of decades and then get a retirement pension and use that to make an ecologically sustainable farm.
The whole thing reminds me of the Zionists who go to work on a kibbutz and pretend they're doing some meaningful, beneficial project. Just no. It's a settler colonial venture on stolen land, and these people often plant foreign species which damage the indigenous flora. I don't want to spend the whole episode ranting, but please check out the greenwashing section on decolonizepalestine.com. We'll put it in the description. Eric also visits room 1018A at the Hotel Statler and notices that there's no ledge from which to jump, and that the window is two pane, so he would have had to dive out the window or break it beforehand. One thing I didn't really see addressed that I think we need to point out is that suicide isn't always a decision that people mull over for some time, like sitting on a ledge, and not all suicidal people show obvious signs. A majority of people who kill themselves don't leave a note. We sometimes see people point to a lack of a note or phone call as evidence that maybe someone's death wasn't a suicide, but most people don't do those things. Some people kill themselves on a sudden impulse rather than a thought-out plan. This is more common when the person is impaired by drugs or alcohol or suffering a hangover or withdrawal. It's also more common when that person has access to lethal instruments like a firearm. I actually think the evidence that Frank Olson didn't kill himself is the more substantial thought-out extended in the behavior of people around him, like Robert Lashbrook and his freaky phone call, rather than Frank Olson's own behavior. It does seem like something was causing him to become unhinged, even by his family's recollection. Whether that was something to do with biological weapons or LSD is unfortunately still unknown. In 1993, Alice Olson dies, and her remaining sons, Eric and Nils, want to move Frank's casket and rebury him closer to Alice. They also see this as an opportunity to re-examine the body and find closure in seeing it. The medical report finds no evidence that Frank Olson went through a glass window. The body had no cuts or abrasions. There is evidence of blunt trauma to the head above one of the eyes and a significant injury to the chest. Most of the forensic team concluded that these injuries had been sustained before the fall, but one team member dissented. The NYPD medical examiner changes the cause of death from suicide to cause unknown, pending police investigation.
Then Eric finds the first assassination manual from the CIA, and I quote, "For secret assassination, Either simple or chase, the contrived accident is the most effective technique. When successfully executed, it causes little excitement and is only casually investigated. The most efficient accident in simple assassination is a fall of 75 feet or more onto a hard surface. Elevator shafts, stairwells, unscreened windows, and bridges will serve. Bridge falls into water are not reliable. In simple cases, a private meeting with the subject may be arranged at a properly cased location. The act may be executed by sudden, vigorous, excised word here, of the ankles, tipping the subject over the edge. If the assassin immediately sets up an outcry, playing the horrified witness, no alibi or surreptitious withdrawal is necessary. End quote.
Eric Olson becomes more and more convinced that his father didn't jump out that window. He was murdered. But in the decades since his death, leads have dried up. Most of the individuals involved, like Gottlieb, Lashbrook, and Rouet, have died. Other people have grown old and forgotten. Evidence decays or is destroyed. In 2002, the Olson family reburies Frank's remains and gives a press conference saying that he didn't die because of experimental drugs, but because he had classified information and his moral opposition to the activities of the Army and CIA made him a liability. Technically, however, the case remains unsolved. It's pending police investigation, and the police are no longer investigating. In 2014, Eric meets with Seymour Hersh again and tells him his theory. Frank Olson was murdered by the CIA because he was a security risk. Hersh starts calling around to his sources, and one, who Hersh has worked with for a long time and trusts, reports back, indicating that Olson was, in fact, murdered. According to his source, Olson was very upset about the secrets he learned. Hersh describes him as quote-unquote dangerous. Hersh says he can't publish what he knows because he doesn't have corroborating evidence and doesn't want to expose his source. Seymour Hersh does confirm on camera that there was a procedure to kill dissidents and that Frank Olson was viewed as a dissident. Hersh also points to other suspicious deaths of suspected communists or dissidents, many of them by accidental falls. These include economist Lawrence Duggan, UN legal chief Abraham Feller, senior U.S. Treasury Department official Dexter White, James Forrestal, and James S. Kronthal. Hersh also acknowledges that for shady intelligence agencies, sowing doubt is the same as getting away with it. This was a victory for the CIA. I haven't seen it brought up anywhere, but is it possible that Frank Olson was indeed a spy for another government, namely the Soviet Union, or that the CIA believed he was?
I think that latter question is more prescient because given the number of defections by US troops to the DPRK / the People's Liberation Army in the Korean War, and also you had at the same time revelations of things like the Cambridge Five, which were 5 academics in Cambridge in the UK spying for the Soviet Union, I'm sure senior figures in the US intelligence community were paranoid, probably, and they were seeing double agents and spies under every bed and in every closet.
Yeah, I think it actually is possible that Frank Olson was a spy, or maybe that the Soviets were trying to recruit him to be a spy, and obviously his opposition to the use of biological weapons in the war would have been a compelling reason for him to turn, shall we say. But even if he was a spy, there are procedures for handling spies, trials and such.
Oh, there are procedures. As-Cy Hersh, there's an entire manual on how to get rid of them.
As a side note, Seymour Hersh is so irritating in the interview with Errol Morris. He keeps saying, sorry, I know, but I can't tell you. You seem upset that I know, but I won't tell you. I mean, yeah, Seymour, you agreed to do this interview for a well-known documentarian about the death of Frank Olson, and you seem annoyed that he's asking you about it.
Seymour Hersh is the level of crank I aspire to be.
It's just, I know, but I won't tell you. You mad about that? Yeah, man. Someone has died. At the end of the documentary series, Morris presents a possible scenario for what went down in room 1018A. The CIA suspected Frank Olson was a problem. Something possibly happened at the retreat at Deep Creek Lake to confirm these suspicions. Perhaps Olson made statements critical of government activities and wouldn't recant these comments. Olson realizes what's at stake and tries to quit, but the CIA can't have a potential dissident with state secrets on the loose. They're not going to just let him, retire to Florida. So, The CIA takes Olson to Dr. Abramson, who tells them that Olson is unpredictable. They can't be sure he won't spill secrets. Lashbrook didn't kill Olson. He was a chemist and a thin guy. The CIA has thugs for that, called the Office of Security. These guys are the fixers. The Office of Security didn't know the problem with Frank Olson, and Lashbrook didn't know how they would take care of it. These branches operate separately and aren't supposed to interact or share information. Lashbrook goes into the bathroom at the agreed time and locks the door. Then, the thugs, probably two of them, come into the hotel room where Frank Olson is sleeping.
Yeah, so I think in here, there's an interesting strategy by the CIA where I think it's smart of them to separate the fixers from Lashbrook. First of all, because, Lashbrook probably wasn't physically capable of doing that. But also, even if you get Lashbrook to testify under oath, he could genuinely and honestly say under oath that he had no idea what happened and that he didn't kill Frank Olson.
No, that's an interesting point. And definitely part of how they operate is always creating reasonable doubt.
Yeah, exactly.
Morris gives two permutations of what may have happened next. 1. Olson realizes these thugs are there to kill or disappear him, breaks open the window with the hotel lamp's base, and jumps. Or 2. The thugs hit Olson and break the window with a bat or baton and throw him out. Okay, honestly, I'm stumped. Part of me is like, the CIA is bad and they would definitely murder someone if he were going to expose their genocidal behavior. But another part of me is like, Occam's razor says he probably jumped. The most compelling evidence for me for murder is the overheard phone call. Well, he's gone. That's too bad. Not like, who? What? Who is this? Lashbrook? Are you talking about Frank? What happened? But then I wonder if Lashbrook's absolute non-reaction is maybe evidence that it wasn't murder, because wouldn't he at least have tried to act upset if he was acting?
I mean, to go back to the autopsy report, I think that's one of the biggest, stronger pieces of evidence that he didn't jump, at least. I don't know. I feel like it would have been much easier to get these fixers to come in and kill him than to encourage him to jump or something.
Is it possible Frank Olson just had an awful week-long trip? I mean, I don't think so. I've read that people have used LSD. They can have flashbacks, but it's rare and it's not continuous. It's for like a second. Frank Olson wouldn't have been acting upset all the time. He would have had these very brief hallucinations.
Yeah, as someone who's done LSD, LSD trips and crashes, and they vary from person to person, of course. I don't think they cause depression or suicidal ideation. I guess you could experience something like ego death, and that would be terrifying. But that's a 1 in a million chance, and even then, bad trips wouldn't really last an entire week later.
I suppose it's more likely that if someone were tripping at that very moment, they could have an accident, like run in front of a car, something like that.
Yeah, which begs the question, did they dose him again?
Yeah, but even if this is the case, if you drug someone and they react so severely to those drugs that they kill themselves or get in an accident like this, you are responsible, especially if you're a government organization like the CIA. Like if we can hold a dealer who laces his heroin supply with fentanyl responsible for someone else's overdose, we can definitely blame the CIA for unwittingly drugging people with LSD if it leads to accidents or suicides.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. I think the culpability still lies with the agency. The question is only how they did it, not if they did it, in my opinion.
There's also the LSD and mind control angle. Like, was Olson manipulated to kill himself? Human beings are really sadistic and have found horrible ways to control each other, including torturing people to the point of suicide.
Yeah, I also, to go back to what I said earlier, I wonder if they weren't manipulating him, like, in a subliminal way, but it was more like direct or explicit. Like, I wonder if Lashbrook said something to Olson to direct him to kill himself, like, not in a sort of secret code words way, but in a more like, listen, you either jump out of this window right now, or we will pursue and kill your family, and the agency's capabilities in doing that. And I guess Olson felt compelled to protect his family, maybe?
It was certainly convenient for the Army and CIA that this man who became distraught over their war crimes ended up dead. Definitely convenient.
Yeah, how nice.
I'd highly recommend watching the series Wormwood because it has some excellent found footage, including some Freudian slips. So at one point, Moore shows a news interview with the former CIA director, I believe Richard Helms, saying about Olson something along the lines of, everyone wishes this would just go away, that it never happened. Like, wishing it would go away seems like an admission to me. Like, you wanted him gone and were willing to commit some sort of cover-up.
Yeah, I agree.
Eric has been unable to move on from this case. He needs someone to be held accountable, and so far, he says he doesn't feel any sort of closure. Eric says he needed the truth a long time ago, and searching for decades has taken over his life. Other people say he gets agitated when people aren't able to make progress in the case.
That's really sad.
Final theories. What do we think?
I think the CIA definitely offed him. The question, again, like I said just now, the question isn't if, but how. And as far as I could tell, I think I'm part of the belief that either, like I said, Olson was sat down and was told in no uncertain terms, either you jump out of a window or we'll kill your family, and he did it. Or the other theory, which is, these thugs come into the room and, they kill him and they throw his body out the window while Lashbrook is on the toilet or whatever.
I feel 100% certain that the CIA was responsible for his death, even if that responsibility comes in the form of giving him drugs without his awareness and causing him to have a psychological breakdown. But do I think someone actually bonked him on the head and pushed him out that window? Again, I'm 50-50 on that. I wouldn't be shocked if that were the truth.
Yeah.
Regardless, the CIA is bad and hopefully not listening, but this is a public forum.
The CIA, folks, it's cancelled.
So, if you are interested in more CIA debacles, we are recording later this weekend a Patreon bonus episode about the CIA's assassination attempt of Fidel Castro.
638 attempts to be exact.
Yeah, we're only going to go over what we find are the most interesting and also most, I don't even know the word, ridiculous.
Yeah, these two episodes, I think, showed the CIA in all its conniving and omnipotent evil. But the Fidel episode, I think, is going to show them in a sort of Looney Tunes, Mr. Bean side of them.
Yeah, and we will talk more in detail about how, in my opinion, those things can actually coexist. You can have this very conniving organization that's also loaded with nincompoops.
Oh, absolutely.
So our Patreon is always in the description. It's patreon.com/DasCriminal. And we have a new subscriber, Zoe. Welcome, Zoe.
Welcome.
You can find us on Instagram at DasCriminalPod. Don't worry, we don't post violent or graphic images, but we do post maps and little clips and things that correspond to our episodes. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Tell your friends, get the word out.
Yeah, have a good one, folks. Hope you have a nice week. And until next time, bye.
Hurriya la Palestine. Bye.